A lot of people believe there's more than one person involved. Where are the footprints? There's no drag marks, there's no scuff marks, there's nothing that shows there was any type of fight. If you have two assailants in that home, why do you have to get physical with somebody 84 years old? You can control her without hitting her. I don't have anything right now, factually, that dictates there was more than one person.
The desert night in the Catalina foothills is usually defined by a heavy, prehistoric silence. It is a landscape of jagged saguaros and shifting sands that have kept secrets for millennia. But on the night of February 1st, 2026, that silence was weaponized. In a ranch-style home on a quiet Tucson street, 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie was likely asleep, tucked away in the safety of the house she had called home for over 40 years. Outside, the air was crisp, the stars indifferent. Then, at exactly 1:47 a.m., the digital pulse of the home began to flatline. On the front porch, a shadow detached itself from the darkness. This wasn't a casual intruder or a desperate burglar looking for a quick score. This was a ghost with a plan. A gloved hand reached up, unhurried, precise, and holding a small bouquet of weeds plucked from Nancy's own garden, waved them in front of the lens. It was a low-tech attempt to trick the sensors, a taunt to the technology meant to protect her. Then, with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, the figure physically ripped the Google Nest doorbell camera from its mount. The connection died instantly. The digital eyes of the home were poked out. By the time the sun began to bake the Arizona sand the following morning, Nancy Guthrie was gone. She didn't leave a note. She didn't take her phone. She didn't take the heart medication that kept her alive. What she did leave behind was a trail of blood near the entrance of her home, a crimson signature that turned a simple welfare check into a high-stakes hunt for a predator. For weeks, the world looked at the man who had last seen her alive, her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni. The internet mob, fueled by unverified leaks and dark whispers, had already fitted him for a prison jumpsuit. But while the public was busy destroying a family's reputation, the evidence was whispering a much more terrifying truth. The man in the mask, the one caught in the final frames of recovered footage with a flashlight in his mouth and a holstered firearm, moved with a familiarity that suggested he didn't just know the house, he knew the life inside it. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. This was a masterpiece of premeditation. And as the investigation shifts away from the immediate family, a new, darker circle is coming into focus. A circle of proximity, hidden records, and a mystery that is about to shatter everything we thought we knew. Before we go any deeper into the shadows of the Catalina foothills, if you're ready to dismantle the evidence the headlines missed, hit that like button and subscribe to True Crime Threads. Make sure your notifications are turned on, because in this case, the truth isn't just stranger than fiction, it's closer than you think. Nancy Guthrie wasn't just a resident of the Catalina foothills, she was its heartbeat. At 84, she possessed a sharp, rhythmic vitality that defied her age. A retired educator with a penchant for desert gardening and a steel-trap memory for local history, Nancy lived a life of deliberate independence. Her home was a sanctuary of Southwestern art and family photographs, a lifetime of memories curated with the precision of a woman who valued order above all else. To those who knew her, Nancy was the gold standard, a woman who never missed a Sunday service or a birthday card. But beneath the surface of this quiet suburban stability, the foundations were beginning to hairline fracture. Enter the inner circle. For years, the gravity of Nancy's life had centered around her daughter Annie and her son-in-law Tommaso Cioni. Tommaso was a man of presence, charismatic, perhaps a bit too comfortable in his own skin, and deeply embedded in Nancy's daily logistics. He handled the repairs, he knew the alarm codes, he knew which floorboards creaked under the weight of a midnight snack. To the outside world, they were the picture of multi-generational harmony. But in the months leading up to February, the air in the Guthrie household had grown heavy with a specific kind of unspoken tension. There were whispers of a shadow cabinet, a group of associates orbiting Tommaso, whose backgrounds didn't quite align with the manicured lawns of the foothills. These weren't family friends. They were men of convenience, linked through past business ventures that had withered in the Arizona heat. Among them was a figure investigators would later identify only as the courier, a man seen frequently at a local storage unit Tommaso frequented, a unit that, curiously, was rented in a name that didn't appear on any family tree. Nancy, ever the observer, had begun to notice the subtle shifts. She mentioned to a close friend that the house felt crowded, even when she was alone. It was a haunting premonition. She had started double-checking her locks, a habit she'd never had in 40 years. She wasn't afraid of a stranger. She was afraid of a ghost she might already know. The suspect list wasn't just a collection of names. It was a map of proximity. Every person with a key, every contractor with a code, and every friend of a friend who had stepped over that threshold became a thread in a web that was slowly tightening. Nancy's dreams were simple, a peaceful retirement surrounded by the desert she loved. But someone in that inner circle had a different dream, one that required Nancy Guthrie to disappear, leaving behind a vacuum of assets and a house full of secrets. In the immediate aftermath of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, the spotlight didn't just drift toward the family. It anchored there. According to official reports from the Pima County Sheriff's Department, the last person to see Nancy alive was her son-in-law, Tommaso Cioni. On the evening of January 31st, Nancy had dinner at the home of her daughter Annie and Tommaso. It was an evening that, on the surface, felt routine. A family meal, shared laughter, the kind of mundane Sunday ritual that usually leaves no trace. Yet, the details provided by Cioni to investigators began to draw a roadmap for the timeline of a crime. He reported that he drove Nancy the short distance back to her home, ensuring she was safely inside before he departed around 9:30 p.m. But it is the gap between that departure and the early hours of February 1st that has become the focal point of a national obsession. The digital evidence tells a story of a house under siege long before the sun rose. Police reports confirm that at 1:47 a.m., the doorbell camera was manually disabled, not by a glitch, but by a physical assault. Forensic technicians recovered residual data from the Google Nest servers showing a masked, gloved figure using vegetation from Nancy's own garden to block the lens before the feed went dark. Suspicion regarding the inner circle intensified when investigators executed search warrants at the residence of Annie and Tommaso. Neighbors watched as FBI agents and local deputies fanned out across the property, eventually emerging with paper grocery sacks and white trash bags filled with evidence. Most striking was the report that a vehicle belonging to Nancy's daughter was towed into police custody for forensic processing. While Cioni remained publicly cooperative and was not immediately named a suspect, a specific theory began to circulate through the digital grapevine: the mustache theory. After the FBI released enhanced stills of the intruder, observers noted the faint silhouette of a mustache beneath the suspect's mask. Social media was quick to point out that Cioni shared this physical trait, though authorities cautioned that such details are far from a fingerprint. However, the police reports highlight a more concrete and chilling connection. The intruder moved with an uncanny knowledge of the home's security dead zones. They didn't stumble. They navigated the property with a level of comfort that suggested prior access. As investigators combed the desert brush, they found a black glove near the home, a twin to one found inside Nancy's residence. This physical link, combined with the discovery of Nancy's DNA on her own porch, confirmed that a struggle had occurred. The investigation was now expanding into Cioni's broader circle, looking into former associates and bandmates. This pivot suggested that the police weren't just looking for a motive, they were looking for the hands that carried out the deed. Was the son-in-law a witness, a victim of circumstance, or the key that unlocked the door for a predator? As the trail of blood on the porch dried, the paper trail of police reports was only just beginning to bleed the truth. The true horror of Nancy Guthrie's abduction isn't just that it happened, but how it was executed, with a level of technical precision that suggests the attacker didn't just stumble upon her porch. They came to silence the house itself. According to forensic data retrieved from the backend servers, the siege began at precisely 1:47 a.m. in the black and white grain of the security feed. A figure emerges from the desert scrub. This person is not a frantic amateur. They are wearing a ski mask, neoprene gloves, and a 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker backpack, a detail the FBI would later use to try and trace the suspect to local retail outlets. But it's what the suspect does next that chills the spine. In a move that feels almost ritualistic, the intruder approaches the doorbell camera holding a small bouquet of weeds and vegetation plucked from Nancy's own front yard. They wave the plants in front of the lens, a low-tech attempt to trigger the motion sensors or perhaps obscure their face before moving in for the kill. Then, with a sudden, violent wrench, the camera is physically ripped from its mounting. The screen goes black. Yet, as the suspect would soon learn, you cannot truly kill a signal in the 21st century. Despite the camera being disconnected, technicians were able to pull residual data. These final, haunting frames show the intruder packing the porch with the confidence of a homeowner. Most disturbingly, the silhouette reveals a holstered handgun, and beneath the mask, the faint but unmistakable outline of a mustache. Inside the house, the silence was absolute until it wasn't. There was no shattered glass, no splintered wood. The intruder simply engaged the handle and the door opened. At 2:28 a.m., just 40 minutes after the camera was destroyed, Nancy's pacemaker, a device keeping her heart in rhythm, disconnected from the monitoring app on her phone. This was the moment of the physical exit. Nancy Guthrie was no longer in the house. As we look at the chilling precision of this crime, it raises a question for all of us. In an age where we are constantly watched, how did someone know exactly when and how to turn the lights out? Before we continue, I want to take a moment to check in with you. This case has captured the attention of the entire country, from the deserts of Arizona to the newsrooms of New York. Where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments below. We read every single one, and your engagement helps us keep these stories alive. The vacuum left by Nancy Guthrie's disappearance was immediately filled by a frantic, high-tech dragnet. Within hours of the 911 call, the Pima County Sheriff's Department and the FBI turned the foothills into a forensic laboratory. They weren't just looking for Nancy. They were looking for the digital assassin who had meticulously dismantled her security. The investigation first pivoted to the hardware. When technicians analyzed the base of the ripped-out Google Nest camera, they found more than just jagged wires. They found a signature of intent. The intruder hadn't just pulled the camera. They had used a specific tool to bypass the mounting bracket, a detail that suggested professional or mechanical knowledge. As the sun rose over the Catalina Mountains, the search expanded to the surrounding desert. K-9 units were deployed, catching a scent that led them several hundred yards from the property line to a cluster of creosote bushes. There, investigators made a discovery that changed the trajectory of the case. A discarded black glove, identical in make and fiber to one found inside Nancy's hallway. But it was what lay beneath the glove that stilled the air. A set of fresh tire tracks that didn't belong to any vehicle registered to the Guthrie or Cioni households. The digital trail, however, was where the shadow cabinet began to bleed into the evidence. Forensic downloads of nearby cellular towers revealed a burner phone pinging off a station less than a mile from Nancy's home at 2:00 a.m. That phone had only 3 numbers in its outgoing log. One led to a local delivery driver, a man who had been seen in the neighborhood frequently, but had no official reason to be there that night. The second led to a defunct business once managed by Tommaso Cioni. The third was an encrypted line that investigators could not immediately crack. Then came the man with the backpack. Surveillance footage from a gas station 3 miles away, recorded at 3:15 a.m., showed a figure matching the physical build of the intruder. The individual was purchasing a high-volume jug of distilled water and a pack of heavy-duty cleaning wipes. He was wearing the same 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack seen on the porch. When he leaned over the counter to pay, the camera caught a glimpse of a dark, groomed mustache protruding from the sides of a surgical mask. The pressure began to mount on the Cioni household. Search warrants were executed with clinical speed. Agents moved through the home, focusing heavily on the garage and a specific white SUV. Neighbors watched as the vehicle was loaded onto a flatbed, its tires covered in plastic to preserve any soil samples from the desert floor. Inside the house, the shadow cabinet began to fall apart. Interviews with Cioni's associates revealed a web of financial instability and a series of private meetings held in the weeks leading up to February. But while the walls were closing in on the suspects, the mystery only deepened. Among the seized items was a handwritten note found in a trash bin, not a ransom demand, but a list of coordinates in the Arizona wilderness. It was a map to nowhere, or perhaps a map to the place where Nancy Guthrie's story was meant to end. The most haunting aspect of the footage recovered from the night of February 1st isn't the violence, it's the silence. When investigators slowed down the frame-by-frame analysis of the intruder, they didn't see a panicked criminal or a clumsy burglar. They saw a man who moved with the chilling, fluid grace of someone walking through his own living room. The suspect didn't hesitate at the gate. He didn't search for the camera. He walked directly to the Google Nest unit, as if he had installed it himself, his hand reaching out with surgical precision to blind the house. Even more disturbing was the entry itself. There was no shattered glass, no splintered wood, and no marks of a crowbar on the door frame. The intruder simply engaged the handle, and the door opened. To the Pima County Sheriff's Department, this suggested one of two terrifying possibilities. Either the door had been left unlocked in a high-end neighborhood at 2:00 a.m., or the person standing on that porch possessed a key. As these details leaked to the public, the digital world ignited. True crime forums and social media sleuths began a relentless campaign of side-by-side comparisons. They took high-resolution photos of Tommaso Cioni from family vacations and overlaid them with the grainy, shadowed stills of the masked intruder. They pointed to the gait, the specific width of the shoulders, and most obsessively, the mustache silhouette visible beneath the mask. The internet had reached its verdict long before a single witness was sworn in. They believed the son-in-law was the monster in the dark. The vitriol was deafening. Tommaso was branded in the court of public opinion, his every movement scrutinized, his grief dismissed as a performance. The narrative was perfect for a viral headline: a betrayal from within, a son-in-law trading a mother's life for an inheritance. But forensic truth is rarely as simple as an internet theory. While the eye test convinced the masses, the hard evidence began to tell a different story. The Pima County Sheriff's Department, alongside the FBI, conducted an exhaustive deep dive into Tommaso Cioni's life. They tracked his phone's GPS with meter-by-meter accuracy. They analyzed the digital exhaust of his vehicle's computer system. They even went as far as testing the specific fiber composition of the clothes found in his home against the glove discovered in the desert. The result was a definitive shift in the investigation. After weeks of intense scrutiny, authorities took the rare step of publicly distancing the son-in-law from the physical act of the crime. The forensic timeline simply didn't bridge the gap. The mustache, the gait, and the familiarity were compelling coincidences, but they weren't proof. The police cleared Tommaso Cioni of being the man on the porch, effectively shattering the internet's favorite theory. However, clearing the man didn't clear the circle. If it wasn't the son-in-law, then who was this person who moved like a member of the family? Who else had the keys? Who else knew the exact location of the cameras? The investigation wasn't ending. It was pivoting toward the shadow cabinet, the associates and hangers-on who had spent enough time around the Cioni and Guthrie households to learn their rhythms, their weaknesses, and their codes. The man in the mask was a ghost, but he was a ghost with a history. And as the police looked away from the family, they began to look at the people the family had trusted far too much. In the quiet, tactical space of a high-stakes investigation, time is the only currency that matters. Every hour the police spend chasing a dead end is an hour the perpetrator spends vanishing into the horizon. And in the mystery of Nancy Guthrie, the suspect may have found his most effective weapon not in a firearm, but in the collective obsession of the internet. While the world was fixated on the mustache and the gait of Tommaso Cioni, the actual investigation was being buried under a mountain of digital noise. More than 13,000 tips flooded the FBI and the Pima County Sheriff's Department within the first 12 days. While some were legitimate, thousands were simply echoes of social media theories, people reporting Cioni's height, his past as a band member, and even the arched eyebrows of his associates. This raises a chilling possibility that investigators are now forced to consider. Was the public scrutiny of the son-in-law a deliberate part of the suspect's plan? If the intruder truly knew the family's rhythms, if he knew the doorbell camera's placement, and the fact that Tommaso was the last person to see Nancy alive, he likely also knew that Cioni would become the immediate, instinctive target for both the police and the public. By moving with a build and a facial hair silhouette that mirrored the son-in-law, the perpetrator didn't just hide his face, he wore a mask of proximity. The time used by news outlets and digital sleuths to debate Cioni's innocence was time the suspect used to broaden the gap. While the internet was busy deconstructing family dinner alibis, the man with the 25-liter Ozark Trail backpack was moving. He was purchasing cleaning supplies at a gas station miles away. He was navigating the desert scrub where a single black glove would later be found, a glove that, upon testing, contained DNA from an unknown male, not Tommaso Cioni. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nano eventually had to step in to break the cycle of speculation. On February 16, 2026, he took the extraordinary step of officially clearing the entire Guthrie family, siblings and spouses alike, calling them victims who had been 100% cooperative. He described the accusations against them as cruel and not based in fact. But the damage was done. The focus on the family had acted as a smoke screen. It allowed the shadow cabinet, that outer ring of associates, contractors, and strangers who had enough access to learn the home's layout, to remain in the periphery. The suspect hadn't just committed a kidnapping. He had successfully outsourced his cover-up to a global audience hungry for an inside job narrative. As the case enters its third week with no arrests and no proof of life, the investigation has pivoted away from the living room and back into the desert. The man in the mask remains at large, having successfully used the most crowded room in the world, the internet, to ensure he was the only one standing in the dark. As the search for Nancy Guthrie enters its third week, the Arizona desert remains a vast, unyielding vault. The tactical gear has been packed away, the giant privacy tents have been folded, and the 24-hour news cycle has begun to drift, leaving behind a family suspended in a permanent, agonizing now. The final pieces of the forensic puzzle have revealed a crime of staggering contradiction. On one hand, you have the digital assassin, the man who moved with surgical familiarity, who knew the doorbell's placement and the house's blind spots. On the other, you have the sloppy trail left in the scrub, a single black nitrile glove found 2 miles away, yielding an unknown male DNA profile that matches neither the Guthrie family nor their closest associates. It is a profile that belongs to a ghost, a man who remains a shadow in the backend of a Google Nest server. The ransom notes, once a source of frantic hope, have chilled into a different kind of silence. With deadlines passed and no proof of life ever provided, investigators are left to wonder if the demands were a secondary crime, a digital scavenger hunt designed to capitalize on a family's desperation, or perhaps the ultimate misdirection. By leading the world to look for a kidnapper with a Bitcoin wallet, the true perpetrator ensured that no one was looking for a body in the creosote. For Savannah Guthrie and her siblings, the cost of this mystery is immeasurable. They have been forced to grieve in the glare of a global spotlight, defending their own integrity while begging for the return of a woman who cannot survive without the medication she left on her nightstand. "We believe our mom is still out there," Savannah pleaded in a recent statement, her voice thick with the weight of 20 days of silence. "Law enforcement is working tirelessly. She was taken, and we don't know where. We need your help." The public, too, is left with a haunting reflection. The same internet that promised to help find Nancy also acted as a playground for the suspect's greatest trick, the manipulation of our own suspicion. We were so busy looking at the son-in-law's mustache that we missed the predator in the backpack. Nancy Guthrie is still out there. Somewhere in the foothills, or perhaps far beyond them, lies the answer to what happened in those 10 minutes of darkness on February 1st. Until then, the case stands as a reminder that the most dangerous people aren't always the strangers at the gate. They are the ones who know exactly how to turn out the lights. Was the internet's obsession with the son-in-law a tragedy of social media, or was it a masterfully laid trap by the real killer? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to stay updated as new evidence breaks in the Nancy Guthrie case, make sure to like this video and subscribe to True Crime Threads. Turn on your notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into the mysteries the headlines won't tell you. Thank you for watching. Stay safe and keep looking for the truth.